Hi, I'm Mira. Welcome to another story. Let's see where this one takes us. The forest's bioluminescent glow had always been Vennar's solace. The soft green and blue light of the mosses and flowers cast a gentle shimmer across the darkened landscape, making the perpetual night feel alive. But now even this light seemed to be fading, dimming to a sickly pallor that left Vennar uneasy. They leaned closer to their workbench, the glow of a nearly dead flower reflecting in their tired eyes. The cabin was silent, save for the faint scratch of their knife slicing through roots. Vennar worked methodically, extracting the plant's juices and mixing them with glowing moss paste in an attempt to preserve the light. Yet, as they applied the mixture to a wilting sprig, the glow didn't return. The plant sat lifeless in their hands. They exhaled sharply, setting the plant down as frustration churned in their chest. The forest was changing, and not even their careful remedies seemed to matter. A sharp knock startled Vennar from their thoughts. Visitors were rare in the depths of the forest, especially now with fear gripping the village. Another knock came, more insistent, and Vennar grabbed a small lantern before heading to the door. When they opened it, a familiar figure stood in the faint glow. Kaela, the village outcast, leaned casually against the doorframe, her dark curls wild and her expression unreadable. Her patched cloak and the dagger at her side made her look more like a rogue than a witch, but that distinction hadn't mattered to the villagers. "Long time no see, herbalist," she said, her tone dry. "What do you want, Kaela?" Vennar replied, their voice sharp. They didn't trust her, not fully. She had a reputation for meddling in things others wouldn't dare touch. Kaela's smirk faded. "There's something wrong with the forest. It's worse than you think." Vennar folded their arms. "I know the plants are dying. That's not news." "It's not just the plants," Kaela said, stepping closer. "The darkness, it's spreading, and I've seen what's causing it." Vennar frowned, their skepticism rising. "What are you talking about?" Kaela's tone shifted, urgency creeping into her voice. "There's a place deep in the forest, a clearing where the shadows gather. It's alive, Vennar, feeding on us, on our secrets, our guilt. If we don't stop it, it'll swallow everything." Vennar shook their head. "You sound like the villagers when they blamed you for the crops failing." Kaela's jaw tightened, but she held Vennar's gaze. "I don't care if you believe me, but if you don't come with me, the village is doomed." Vennar hesitated. Kaela's reputation made trusting her difficult, but her words carried a weight that unsettled them. The forest had always been strange, but if Kaela was right, this was something far worse. Finally, they sighed. "If I come, it's to find the truth, not to chase fairy tales." Kaela grinned, her defiance returning. "Fair enough, just try to keep up." The forest grew darker as they ventured deeper, its once vibrant glow fading into flickers of pale light. The air felt heavy, thick with a cold that seemed to press against their skin. Vennar couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, though nothing moved in the shadows. "This isn't natural," Vennar muttered, breaking the tense silence. Kaela glanced back, her expression grim. "You're right. It's not." She stopped suddenly, crouching to inspect the ground. The moss beneath her hand crumbled into ash-like dust, its glow extinguished. "The closer we get, the worse it gets." "And what's it exactly?" Vennar asked. "You'll see soon enough," Kaela replied, her voice low. When the clearing came into view, Vennar stopped in their tracks. The forest opened into a wide expanse, devoid of life. At its centre stood a massive, gnarled tree, its bark black and glossy like obsidian. Shadows writhed at its base, moving like living tendrils that pulsed with a malevolent energy. Vennar felt a chill run down their spine. "What is that?" "The heart of the darkness," Kaela said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And if we don't stop it, it'll keep growing." Vennar's pulse quickened as they stared at the monstrous tree. This wasn't just a dying forest, this was something far worse. And Kaela was right. They had to stop it. But how? Kaela turned to Vennar, her sharp eyes piercing through the dim light. "You're the herbalist. If anyone can figure out how to kill it, it's you." Vennar nodded reluctantly, their mind racing. The answers they needed were here, somewhere in the darkness. They only hoped they'd find them before it was too late. The clearing was silent, but it wasn't peaceful. The air buzzed with a faint vibration, a as if the shadows themselves carried an unspoken threat. Vennar stared at the massive, twisted tree, its obsidian bark seeming to pulse in time with the writhing tendrils at its roots. Every instinct told them to turn and run, but the weight of Kaela's expectant gaze kept them rooted. "I need to get closer," Vennar said, their voice trembling despite their effort to sound calm. Kaela nodded, gripping the hilt of her dagger. "I'll cover you. Just tell me what you need." Vennar hesitated, scanning the clearing for any hint of danger beyond the obvious. "If the shadows move, distract them. I don't know how they work, but if they're alive, they'll protect whatever that thing is." Kaela smirked faintly. "You're starting to sound like me." Ignoring the comment, Vennar reached into their satchel, pulling out a collection of glowing moss, roots, and a small vial of bioluminescent sap. They crouched, grinding the ingredients together in a makeshift mortar. Their hands trembled as they worked, the shadows' shifting movements drawing their attention every few moments. "Why is it like this?" Vennar muttered, more to themselves than to Kaela. "The forest shouldn't act this way." Kaela crouched beside them, her dagger gleaming faintly. "It's not just the forest, it's the village. People there have been hiding things, secrets, guilt, anger. That tree isn't just growing in the forest, it's growing out of them." Vennar's hands paused mid-motion. "You think the villagers did this?" Kaela shrugged, her expression grim. "Maybe not on purpose, but all that fear and denial has to go somewhere. The forest doesn't just hide our sins, it reflects them." Vennar frowned, their mind racing. "So it's feeding on the village's secrets. How do we stop something like that?" Kaela glanced at the tree, her jaw tightening. "You're the one with the remedies. I'm just here to keep you alive." Vennar returned to their work, their thoughts tangled with Kaela's words. If the tree fed on fear and guilt, then attacking it directly might not be enough. They needed more than a physical solution. They needed to weaken its hold on the village. But how? As Vennar finished mixing the paste, the shadows surged suddenly, their movements erratic and frenzied. A tendril lashed out, forcing Kaela to roll to the side, her dagger flashing as she slashed through the inky form. The severed piece dissolved into the ground, but more shadows emerged, writhing with renewed aggression. "Vennar!" Kaela shouted. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster!" Vennar grabbed the jar of glowing paste and stood, their knees shaking. "Keep them busy," Kaela didn't answer, too focused on the onslaught of shadows. She moved with practiced agility, her strikes precise, though every swing seemed to cost her energy. Vennar forced themselves to focus, darting toward the tree's roots. The tendrils lashed at them, but they ducked and weaved, clutching the jar tightly. Reaching the base of the tree, Vennar knelt and smeared the paste onto the roots. The glow spread quickly, crawling along the bark like fire. The tree shuddered violently, its groaning sound reverberating through the clearing. The shadows recoiled, their movements frantic as the light continued to spread. "It's working!" Vennar shouted, hope surging through them. But the relief was short-lived. The shadows regrouped, their tendrils converging on the base of the tree as if to smother the light. Vennar backed away, their breath quickening. The tree's groans grew louder, its bark splitting in places to reveal glowing cracks. Yet the darkness fought back with equal ferocity. Kaela ran to Vennar's side, her chest heaving. "It's not enough." Vennar stared at the writhing mass, their mind racing. "It's feeding on something deeper. If we don't stop the source..." Kaela grabbed their arm, her eyes sharp. "Then we take away its food. The villagers, their secrets." Vennar's heart sank. "How?" "They won't listen to us." Kaela smirked faintly. "They don't have to. You just need to show them what happens when they don't." Kaela's plan was as reckless as it was brilliant. They returned to the village, the bioluminescent plants growing brighter with each step. Vennar called for a gathering in the square, their voice trembling but resolute. The villagers came reluctantly, their expressions filled with suspicion and unease. "The forest is dying," Vennar began, their voice echoing across the square. "But it's not just the forest's fault. It's ours." The crowd murmured, confusion spreading like wildfire. Kaela stepped forward, her presence commanding. "The shadows are feeding on what you've buried, your guilt, your anger, your lies. If you don't face them, the forest will take everything." The villagers' protests were immediate, their fear erupting into shouts and accusations. But Vennar held their ground, raising their hands to quiet them. "If you won't believe us, then come see for yourselves. The forest doesn't Leading the villagers to the clearing, Vennar and Kaela stood at the tree's base as the shadows wreathed around it. The villagers gasped, their faces pale as the darkness pulsed and seethed. Slowly, one by one, confessions began to spill, arguments unspoken, betrayals hidden, guilt buried deep. The shadows recoiled with each admission, their hold on the tree weakening. As the villagers faced their truths, the tree began to crumble. Its bark split open and the shadows dissolved into the air like smoke. The clearing grew brighter, the bioluminescent plants reclaiming their place. Vennar turned to Kaela, their chest heaving. "You were right," Kaela smirked, though her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. "I usually am." The villagers stood in stunned silence as the shadows retreated, dissipating into the air like smoke caught in a strong wind. The massive tree at the clearing's centre shuddered, its glossy obsidian bark cracking and crumbling under the weight of light spreading from the bioluminescent paste. The tendrils writhed one final time, then collapsed, leaving the ground eerily still. Vennar leaned heavily on their knees, the empty jar of paste dangling limply from their hand. Sweat dripped from their brow, and their breath came in short gasps. Kaela stood beside them, her dagger sheathed but her posture tense. Despite the apparent victory, the clearing radiated an unnerving energy, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. "It's not done," Vennar murmured, their voice hoarse. They gestured toward the tree, whose hollowed trunk still pulsed faintly with residual darkness. "The roots are still feeding on something." Kaela's sharp eyes scanned the clearing, her expression unreadable. "They're feeding on us," she said, her voice low. She turned to the gathered villagers, who stood at the edge of the clearing, their faces pale and uncertain. "It's not enough to just burn the tree. You have to face what it's been growing on." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances, their murmurs swelling into panicked whispers. "This isn't our fault," one of them shouted, an older man whose trembling hands betrayed his anger. "It's the forest. It's always been cursed." Kaela stepped forward, her voice cutting through the crowd like a blade. "Cursed? No, it's been holding up a mirror. All those things you've buried, your guilt, your secrets, your grudges, they didn't just vanish. They grew, and now they're choking the life out of everything." The villagers recoiled, their unease deepening. Vennar straightened, their voice steadier now. "She's right. This tree didn't just appear. It's been feeding on what we refuse to acknowledge. If you don't confront it, the forest will never recover." A tense silence fell over the clearing. The villagers shuffled uncomfortably, their eyes darting between the tree and the glowing roots at its base. Finally, one woman stepped forward. She clutched a woven scarf tightly in her hands, her knuckles white. "My daughter," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I blamed Kaela when she got sick. I spread lies about her, because I couldn't accept that I'd failed to keep her warm during the cold season." Tears streamed down her face as she fell to her knees. "I'm sorry." The shadows around the tree recoiled slightly, their tendrils pulling back into the hollow trunk. The faint pulse of darkness dimmed. Another villager stepped forward, a middle-aged man with a scar running down his cheek. "I accused my brother of stealing my tools," he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. "He didn't. I just couldn't bear that he was better than me." Again the shadows retreated, the pulsing dimming further. One by one the villagers began to speak. Confessions tumbled out like stones breaking free of a dam. Grudges, betrayals, fears, all the hidden truths that had festered within the village were laid bare. The air grew lighter with each admission, and the bioluminescent plants at the clearing's edge began to glow brighter, their light spreading toward the tree. Vennar and Kaela watched as the tree began to crumble, its hollow trunk collapsing inward. The shadows vanished completely, and in their place, vibrant mosses and glowing flowers sprouted from the soil. The oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a warmth that seeped into the air. "It's over," Vennar said, their voice quiet but certain. Kaela crossed her arms, her lips curving into a faint smile. "For now." The villagers left the clearing humbled, their steps lighter but their expressions marked by the weight of what they had revealed. Vennar and Kaela lingered, watching as the forest slowly reclaimed the space. The tree's ashes were already being overtaken by glowing fungi and soft moss, the forest's light restoring itself. "You did good, herbalist," Kaela said, her tone softer than usual. So did you, Vennar replied, glancing at her. I didn't think they'd listen. Kaela smirked, though there was a trace of sadness in her eyes. Fear makes people do stupid things, but sometimes all it takes is one person to show them a way out. Vennar studied her for a moment, then nodded. What about you? Will you go back to the village? Kaela's smirk widened. And ruin my reputation as a mysterious outcast? Not a chance. Vennar chuckled despite themselves. Well, the forest will always need someone like you. And someone like you to fix my messes, Kaela retorted, winking. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the glow of the forest surrounding them. The fight was over, but the work was just beginning. The village had faced its darkness, and so had they. But there would always be shadows, always secrets waiting to take root. As they turned to leave, Vennar glanced back at the clearing, now alive with light. For the first time in years, the forest felt alive again, and so did they. Thanks for listening. If the story stuck with you, come back next time for another journey.